Right, guys. Michael, how are you?
G'day.
Oh, good. Oh, look at that. Now I'm just gonna.
Magic. Hello, everyone.
Yeah. This is everyone.
The guys that are wearing the boots will have the biggest challenge because, g'day, because you're highly likely to want to fall asleep. And it's not because I'm boring, by the way. I hope not. Anyway, nice to meet you all. I understand from Dougal we've got age ranges from around in the 20s to, I believe there's somebody who's 60. I've got a few slides to share just to keep me on track. And thanks, Dougal, for the invite. And thanks, Grant, for bringing the gear in. We'll be talking about different sorts of recovery, and based on my competition years and my coaching years, and also turning recovery into a business, I'd like to share with you some tips and tricks. Really handsome athlete on the screen there, on his felt. There's of course I better mention felt there, Dougal, for you. So my thanks to Dougal for inviting us, and significantly Dougal's been an ambassador of ours for quite some time as well, and Grant Wengler, who's there, is our New Zealand agent. So just a little bit about me. I spent about close to 40 years in technology, including Meditech. So a lot of what I learned in that time was relevant to what I'm doing now. I also spent quite a few years bike riding, and a real mixture of road racing, a little bit of velodrome. Wasn't very good at it, but it was very good experience. Specialist time trial, and then I morphed into in Asia, where I've been 20 years. I discovered I could swim quite well, thanks Mum and Dad. I have a big chest and skinny legs, so I sit in the water really well, and it made me a fast swimmer. Everyone around me assumed that I'd been swimming for years and years, but I just got a good roll of the dice from a swimming point of view. So I won quite a few races in my age group, and was on the national team, represented New Zealand at age group, won a few national champs here and there, had my share of good race days. Got myself into a bit of trouble and had two surgeries, one spinal surgery and one hip resurface due to arthritis, fairly premature arthritis. So I know what it is to find out what unhealthy pain looks like, and I was a bit stupid to ignore it, and it got me into a bit of trouble. So no more running for me, but I'm happily back on my bike. So in partly straddling my competition years, I coached as an athlete coach, and then I coached around about 50 people here in Asia. So real combination of age groups and real combination of nationalities. So here we have, it's pretty international. We had around 20 different nationalities in our team. Some of them came from non-swimming countries, like India, for example. There's no swimming pools pretty much in India, so nobody knows how to swim. So lots of challenges, and not the least of which in this part of the world is the heat. Because I've just ridden this morning, just over 100k, and the temperature range was 26 to 32 during the ride. It was a bit cooler today at the start of the ride. So we have different things to cope with than you do in New Zealand. I found I was a pretty good hot weather racer, which is a bit unusual for a bigger guy. Not everyone who's a little bigger is good at racing in the heat. And then that morphed into the recovery systems business, which has been the last 5 years. And we supply three distinct markets: medical, athlete, and also equine. So we do what you have on your legs, the folks that have the boots on. We have a version of that for racehorses and dressage, show jumpers, and so on. Okay, so just into the agenda. I've got some tips that I learned that were useful for me, and some of it's about what we do as a business, because I thought it was too good to not put some effort in to try and make it successful and put it in the hands of people that need it the most as well. And I want to talk about some tools that I found useful. I want to talk about the role of sports medicine and having, as an athlete and also as a coach, having some really good medical advice around you for what I call non-responding athletes. In other words, you're doing all the right things, but there's something just not clicking, and it's beyond my mandate or beyond my expertise as a coach looking in on that to understand exactly how to get to the bottom. So we had some people in our corner that I want to talk about general concepts of what we look for and how that helped from a recovery point of view. Then we'll finish up with some athlete case studies as well. So I just on the medical side, and I know we've got around about 1/3 of the team, the training camp, are women. One of the most common things I found that 1/3 of women are iron deficient. I think that number for women athletes is closer to 50%. And it used to be back in the old days, the GP would prescribe iron tablets, which are not the best. There's some side effects and so on. Lately, in the last number of years, iron infusions have become the protocol for treating iron deficiency, because obviously you're going to feel flat and fatigued and not respond well from training. So looking at iron is a very important thing. Doesn't happen to the men quite so much, but it's quite common amongst women athletes. And then having a good sports med doctor in your bag of tricks is also really good. Someone who's going to look at bloods and look for areas that are probably outside of the normal range of medical tests. So they're going to look into some areas like serum folate and the ratios between estrogen and testosterone levels and so on, and in order to define what would be healthy for the athlete. And finally, from a biomechanics point of view, I also I've got one superpower when it comes to endurance sports, and that's looking at a person on a bike and knowing whether it's right or not. And mostly I can get seat height and forward and back position. I'm not a qualified bike fitter, by the way, but I tend to be able to hone in on what works, and also hip disparities or leg length disparities where someone's favoring one side of the saddle because one leg's longer, and how that can impact on performance and also fatigue, and ultimately that will impact on recovery as well. So I work with a number of people who were very biomechanically sound in order to get people from the feet up, and that's from the right running shoe, the orthotics, and the pedaling position of the inside the bike shoe, also where orthotics were needed, or cleat position, right from the feet up, because a lot of this happens from the feet up. If you can get those right, you're limiting the fatigue on the body. If there's a compromise somewhere in those areas, then you're already starting behind the 8 ball. Because ultimately the journey is a journey of marginal gains, right? Training makes you worse, recovery makes you better. And I would say as a general statement across our business, recovery means different things to different people. For example, when we're dealing with our medical practitioners with a diabetic or someone who has lymphedema or DVT, then recovery means more or less returning to some form of quality of life. So when we're talking with athletes, it's marginal gains. If I asked Dougal what marginal gains were, he would probably say, and I'll ask him the question later, he'll probably say something that gives me a paycheck at the end of the day, and in terms of race fees, and keep some high profile amongst his sponsors and supporters as well. To most of our clients, our customers, our athlete customers, marginal gains means balancing the books, balancing the equation between training, work, family commitments, and their love and passion for the sport. Recovery is a key element to make that whole equation work. So it's a very, very important thing. Of course, I have two significant pictures here. One is Team Sky. Of course, Sir David Brailsford kind of coined the phrase marginal gains. People were calling it different things. He kind of coined that term to the point where they kept on looking for marginal gains, and the English cycling went from hardly ever having won a medal to, in the last number of years, to being very successful. So that was part of the process. Of course, I've got a picture of a lady with the New Zealand flag. Can anyone tell me who the lady in the picture is?
Courtney Duncan?
Yeah, Courtney Duncan. Just won back-to-back world champs. So last Sunday, won the world champs again. Now, Courtney, I'll talk about her in a little more depth later. She's overcome a lot in order to get to that. She knows and understands what marginal gains look like. Great Kiwi example from not far away from us all. I want to start off talking about some tools that I've found useful over the years, and I'll start off with one that I absolutely hate, and that's the foam roller. And I would say that I've probably got an example of every foam roller ever made, and I look at them in my cupboard and I admire them, and I hardly ever use them. But when I do, particularly because we're in repetitive sports, so running is one-dimensional, a little better if you're running trails, of course, because you're stimulating the body quite differently than on the road. Cycling very much one-dimensional, and swimming fairly one-dimensional in terms of its movement patterns, so you get muscle shortening. The foam roller is your friend, and I know that it's probably not your favorite activity, but foam rolling and then stretching, I think, are a very good protocol. Another recent example of that is the percussion gun and stretching. So percussion guns are part of the release process in my view, and there's lots of them out there. The one in the picture here is the Terra gun, three-sided handle, quite ergonomic, but there's tons of them out there. I'm not saying it's the first thing you should go out and buy, but there are things to consider. With all these modalities, it's what you can build into your routine and do consistently will make a difference to that whole marginal gain scenario. Then hands-on sports massage. Proper sports masseuse are worth their weight in gold. And it's that thing you're probably going to do once a month or thereabouts, depending on your training load. And it's probably going to be that thing that you walk away nearly crying from, because the good sports masseuse is going to go in and break down scar tissue and allow the muscles to lengthen out. A little bit like the other two processes, but I think a good sports masseuse, it can get really into the blockages and problem areas, and I would consider, my advice to my athletes in the past was to have your sports masseuse in your recovery week, because you're going to be worse before you're better, because of the tissue damage and because of the realignment. I mean, probably tissue damage is a little bit strong. You're actually realigning things and allowing your muscles to start moving again in a proper way. And I mentioned the sports medicine aspects earlier. So the iron levels, having a good doctor who can read bloods, and the biomechanical person in your arsenal as well. Okay. All right, so a couple of other tools. I'm going to talk about sleep as a separate category because it's actually the most important. There's a couple of things that I've been doing. I'll talk about contrast first, and then we'll go on to compression a little later, and also the parasympathetic system. What is it? What, you know, how relevant? What do I need to do? How important is it? And just to give you a bit of an understanding of that. So with contrast therapy, is simply put, is hot and cold showers. That'd be the things that you could probably do consistently, knowing and remembering how cold the water is in New Zealand when you get in the shower. So going from hot to cold is a good way and a simple way of triggering a quicker recovery response. Here we kind of take that a little further. If you have access to a spa that has a plunge pool, then going from spa pool to plunge pool to spa, then to sauna, and doing a rotation around that is very good for recovery. Just that that contracting and expansion of the capillaries, and also there is some autophagy, which is the release of dead cells in order to make room for new blood cells, is also a very useful process for recovery. I personally do this once a week here at a spa in Singapore, and I've found from a joint point of view that my joints recover a lot quicker from hard training. Just a quick note on training. How long is a training week? So when I was in my 30s and I was bike riding in Christchurch at a club called Hawesville, where Grant Wengler was also riding as a junior, in any given week on a club race, we would have between 1 and 3 Olympians turn up. You know, we get to the start line and look around and we go, oh no, there's 3 of them here this week. Welcome to hell. And it was pretty hard racing week in, week out. So back in those days, in my 30s, a training week was 7 days. Now that I'm in my 60s, a training week, in other words, the same load takes me around 10 days to do. And I think for me, that was a game changer when I started thinking about that, because I just need more recovery, including all the tools that we're talking about, but I just needed more recovery in order to balance the equation and make sure those gains are locking themselves in and I'm not digging myself into a hole where I'm just not recovering, the body's not responding, and ending up either getting sick or injured. Okay, so I want to do a bit more of a deep dive into sleep, because ultimately sleep is your number one recovery modality, and should be that thing that you're really focusing on maximizing. I'm a big believer that your regular sleep, getting to bed at the same time and waking around the same time is very important, and I think it should be around sunrise and around sunset. And I know that varies in New Zealand a lot. It doesn't here. It's only about 20 minutes between longest day and shortest day here. But in New Zealand, it really does. So if you can get in the rhythm, the circadian rhythm of natural daylight, I think it is a big helping hand to you. Of course, there are many other factors that you all have: families, relationships, work, the evil thing called work. But what I'm saying is regular, if you can manage it, regular sleep and wake hours are very important. So example of the type of sleeping environment, dark, quiet room if you can. If it isn't quiet where you are, then earplugs. If you can't get your room dark, then wear an eye mask. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I wear a brand called Mantra, M-A-N-T-R-A. I wouldn't say it's the best mask out there, but it's not too bad. And it does completely block the light out. My wife can turn the light on. I have no clue that the light's on. And that's been something that's been really helpful for me. I also sleep on an earthing mat. Now, we're in an environment where we've got Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. We have aircon on here. In Singapore, you might have a heat pump where you are. So I sleep on an earthing mat. So it goes underneath the bed sheet and it's plugged into the earth. So what that's doing is earthing a lot of the EMF. And I can't exactly explain how it works, but what I noticed that my sleep quality improved. And I've got an example here. This is some of my sleep quality. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. Deep sleep, 30%, light sleep, REM sleep, 27%, because between the deep and the REM sleep, and also keeping your light sleep percentage fairly low, is very important for the whole rebuilding process in your body. Because during deep sleep and REM sleep are the times at which your hormone levels are highest, and it's very important for the human growth hormone, the testosterone, muscle rebuilding, the nervous system recovery as well, which is the parasympathetic healing, is very important, obviously, for maximizing your gains. If you're burning the candle at both ends, if you're training hard and not sleeping properly, it's something that really needs to be addressed. You might get away with it for a while, but you won't get away with it for too long. I also investigated but didn't do anything about a cooling pad. So a cooling pad is something that is kind of like a mini waterbed. It's a tiny layer on top of your mattress that has a control unit, which is essentially a refrigeration unit pumping water through. Because some of my athletes in the past were having a lot of trouble regulating their heat. And this, being water-based, is controlling and holding water temperature and keeping the body at a natural sleeping heat. And it's worked quite well for a lot of people. If you look at my sleep numbers, I've got very few marginal gains to get out of my sleep. I'm doing it pretty well, which is good. It took me a long time to get there, though, including the earthing mat really helped me, and the sleep mask. But cooling pad, I'm not going to get much out of it. Some people will. If you're the sort of person that wakes up with your feet sticking out of the sheets, that's your body trying to regulate the heat. You've gotten too hot, and your body's trying to regulate the heat by sticking your feet out, and something like that might be something that you might consider looking into. Do the simple things first, though. The cooling mat is not a cheap solution. Okay, take naps. So quite often naps are really vital for the rebuilding process. So if you're able to, if you're on work from home and you have the opportunity to take 20 minutes out, or half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour, then do it, because those naps are going to be gold for helping with the recovery process as well. Nutrition and timing of nutrition are also really important. Now, this is a really big topic, and if I was to summarize my experiment, my journey with nutrition and intermittent fasting and a whole lot of other things, is I think we're all experiments of one. There are things that people might tell you that work for them. I think you've got to discover what works for you. But for me, I try not to have too heavy a meal at the end of the day. From a carbohydrate point of view, I tend to load it during the day and have a little less in the evening because it affects my sleep. In this part of the world, I avoid MSG because that's just a hallucinogenic as far as I'm concerned. Just the craziest dreams. So I think there's something to be said for it. For some people, having a glass of wine is a great thing. Really helps them to chill out. For some people, having a beer, having 6 beers might not be a good thing though, unless it's after a key race, of course, and then you deserve it. So nutrition, really big topic. I think that deserves somebody who's topic in itself, and that, in my view, deserves somebody who is a specialist nutritionist as well. Try not to use the alarm clock to wake you. Now, what I'm saying, why I say this, is that your HGH levels, your human growth hormone levels, are the highest just before you wake. So if you're prematurely waking, you're missing that last burst of vital muscle growth that you may prematurely miss it just by having the alarm clock going. So that's where I'm coming back to the first point I made about circadian rhythms. Quite important to keep your sleep cycles around about sunrise and sunset. I think that's a fairly important rule to follow. See if that works for you. Measure and track quality and quantity. There's lots of things that you can use these days. The data that I have on the screen here is off my Huawei watch, and after about 3 months of wearing it, I don't wear it anymore because my numbers are pretty much the same every night. So I'm pretty happy with that. I've got that area under control. But I think that's important to look and feedback to your coach, feedback to Dougal, just how you're going, how are you responding, are you recovering from the training load? I think that's very good feedback to your coach. And then look into those areas that where you may not be optimizing around your recovery. Your sleep data will be a real indication of that, of whether you're maximizing that or not. Skip training in favor of a sleep-in. If you're really slammed, and let's face it, we've got more than training as a stress. We've probably all got horrible bosses and you name it, and things that don't go well for us, and that really can put a drain on us. I often found the 8-hour rule was a really good one to follow. So if you had a training session that morning and you're just slammed, 8 hours later after work doing that training session, it could be a different world and you'll get the training session done. So you just need to give yourself permission to do that. And we commonly refer to that as a swings and slides day. Quick story on that. At Hallswell Avon, we had a double Olympian, Chris Nicholson, who was Winter and Summer Olympics, represented New Zealand at the Olympics, also national time trial champ. So Chris was training for the Olympics in Barcelona, I think it was, and it was back in the day when the 100K time trial was part of the Olympics, teams time trial, and they were completely slammed. So they were supposed to go out, they left for their training ride, their coach stayed back at the hotel. They saw the swings and slides at the local park shortly after they started, and they stayed there for 3 hours. So sometimes calling a swings and slides day on yourself is the best possible thing. And I used to love it. Most of my athletes that I coached were what I would call type A athletes. They would just drive themselves into the dust. I had to hold them back rather than push them forward. So whenever I had one of those guys calling a rest day on themselves or a rest morning on themselves, I used to give them a round of applause because I thought that was a very mature and very good understanding of what was going on in their body. So in order to have the bigger picture in mind that they would get to that training session, or maybe they'd miss it altogether, maybe that was the right thing. But, having that trusting in the process enough to call a rest day on yourself is, I think, a very powerful thing. Mentioned this earlier, how many days in your training week? For me, my training week's about 10 days long now, And I know that I've probably only got, in matchbox terms, maybe 2 matches a week of hard sessions that I can do. Now, the rest of them aren't rubbish. I'm still doing things that matter to me, like getting my cadence up, getting my left and right balance on my legs up, because I've had surgery on one side. I'm a bit imbalanced. So working away on things like that, you know, there's always something to do. So, you know, the rest of the rides for me are important. But I know that about 2 matches a week, I can burn about 2 matches a week, and that's it. I will not recover if I try 3. I sometimes do it because I sometimes think I'm still 30 years old, but I soon get reminded that that's not the case anymore. And yeah, I mentioned this earlier. Consider all the other stresses in your life. We're not doing this to make a living. We're doing this for health and wellness. So have that as a, yes, we do want personal best and so on. That's important because you know, goals are important to us. But do you know, have a bit of a balanced approach to the managing all the stress in your life. Any tools and techniques that you can use to enhance sleep are going to be gold for you. You know, whether that's doing some meditation, whether that's using the compression boots that we have here today, whether that's taking a walk last thing in the day, or having a bath, whatever it is to get you into pre-sleep mode is gold. Okay, I want to focus in on compression for a moment, and I want to compare passive compression or compression garments like a stocking with active compression, or as it's known in the medical world, pneumatic intermittent compression. So the major differences, first of all, compression garments are limited in their pressure. They're around about 20 mmHg of pressure. They're static, in other words, they're not moving. So they have a limited effectiveness. They do have some effectiveness, don't get me wrong, but they have a limited effectiveness in moving blood volume, and it's only one directional. Intermittent compression, like the boots that you're trying out today, is a milking action. So it's on and off, it's squeezing, and anyone that's wearing them will know what I'm talking about. And it's up to 240 mmHg of pressure. So it's moving the blood, it's squeezing, then releasing. So the magic happens in 2 ways. It's pushing the bad stuff out through your kidneys, your filtration system, kidneys and liver, and it's bringing the fresh blood supply back to speed up healing, recovery, and gains. It's also triggering your parasympathetic healing system. So your parasympathetic healing system, or for example, muscle soreness is not the muscle, it's actually your nervous system that is in need of healing. We know about the sympathetic sympathetic system, which is your flight and fight. The parasympathetic is your body's rest and digest system. So that's where the healing happens. So the guys that are wearing the boots might be struggling to stay asleep now, because the boots will actually trigger your body's parasympathetic healing. Just because of the movement of the blood, it's activating that rest and digest cycle and system. So let's take a little bit of a look at this. This is using a muscle oxygen sensor on this particular athlete. This guy's a pretty good cyclist around this part of the world. Is one of our ambassadors. And this is a 30-minute recovery session. So, and this is measured in terms of SMO. So that's muscle oxygen boost. So in the first 8 minutes of his session, he had a huge 30%, 32% increase in his muscle oxygen. It actually put his muscle oxygen 8 minutes on the boots, put his muscle oxygen above the point that would normally take him to get to in a 30 or 40 minute warm-up. So there's the first tip, and use case for the boots, warm-up. Particularly useful in any environment, even here in Singapore, where I might, and my athletes might go out and it's 30 degrees. You think, well, that's warm, isn't it? You get warmed up really quickly. But using the muscle oxygen sensors, it typically is taking between 25 and 40 minutes, depending on the athlete, to actually get to a point where they're going to get real value and hit the high notes on what it is that they need to do for that session. So the biohack for that is do 8 minutes on the boots while you're having your coffee before you go out. The other aspect of this is that you're getting the highs and lows of the squeeze and release, and you're getting an ongoing parasympathetic healing benefit, the rest and digest during the treatment. So in this case, it's 30 minutes. It could be as short as 8 minutes for warm-up. It could be 20 to 30 for recovery. It could be 3 sessions for recovery. So I'll talk about that when we get on to some case studies. Here's a few of our kind of high-profile athletes. Of course, Dougal's high-profile, but I'm going to get him to talk in person in a minute. Here's 3 Olympic gold medalists. So Adam Hall is a New Zealand Paralympian. We've got a Paralympian archer, a fairly famous young fella from Singapore, first ever gold medalist, beat Michael Phelps in Rio. World vertical marathon, Susie Walsham. Lima Sapawanga, I had to put a Highlander in there for those of you. And by the way, any Stag supporters in the house? Do we have any Southland Stag supporters? Because they beat Otago yesterday, of course. Well done. Hats off to the I-Towners. And of course, Courtney now and Rugby World Cup. So we actually supplied Rugby World Cup last year. We didn't sponsor them. They bought the product from us and deployed it amongst all the referees. All right, so I wanted to get on to some case studies. First of all, I wondered if, Dougal, if you would mind giving us a minute or two on how you're using recovery systems for your warm-up and recovery.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I've been using them for a couple of years, as you know, Mike, and I use them more so after kind of kiddie sessions, and when I travel, actually, was the big one. So the Blue Max system, do you know what the Blue Max full-length system weighs roughly, Mike?
6 kilos in the bag.
Yeah, so 6 kilos in my luggage was absolutely worth it. I think I've told you this before, 4 days of consecutive racing, so using it every day, and then with the travel in transit, I used to arrive at a random airport somewhere in the world with cankles, and board my next flight, I could see my ankle bones again. So for training, key sessions, and for multi-day racing and travel, they're probably traditionally where I've used them to best effect. And then it wasn't until a conversation with you, and you've just touched on oxygenation and things, where I've realised that there's some value in using them as a warm-up tool without obviously that metabolic cost of warming up the old-fashioned way. So that's probably a bit of a blow-by-blow from me.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much, Dougal. So if I go from top, just briefly, Amelia Rose Watkinson, Kiwi, Brisbane-based, very good 70.3 athlete. So Amelia's, all of these athletes have recovery as a ritual. So it's part of their whole marginal gain strategy. They're very disciplined in different ways at it. So Amelia's very much like that. The two girls in the picture here are twins. You're not seeing double. They are in fact twins. they're Asia's best stand-up paddleboarders. It may seem like there's not much going on a paddleboard, but their bodies are constantly under strain, under stress. It's very, very much through the power muscles, hip, glute, core. So they really benefit from both warm-up before a race and also post-race recovery. Lima was a really good one for us, in that Lima was an athlete that had some career-threatening injuries early in his professional rugby days, and it taught him to really focus in on his recovery a lot better than he had. So rugby being a collision, so Lima's protocol was first thing in the morning, he's on the boots to start his day. And then, depending on what goes on, he'll do another session late in the day. And if he has any collision injuries causing, say, hematomas, bruising, then he'll slip an ice pack inside the boots and have the pressure down quite a bit lower. So that's to control the ice, is to control the bleeding and the pain. And the compression, of course, is helping with the healing process. We don't use ice day in and day out for healing, because essentially ice is good for trauma, because if you've got bleeding, internal bleeding or bruising and pain, ice is a good protocol. But day in, day out, ice delays is not good for recovery, because it delays the healing process. Because the first phase of the healing process is inflammation. And your body then produces the growth hormones in order to create the recovery process. So what we're doing with the boots is speeding up that whole process and quickening getting you through the inflammation process faster in order to get to the gains quicker. So Lima was really good. Courtney also had a number of injuries. You can imagine motocross is a very tough sport, and when you have a spill, it's normally, it can be really, really hard on the body. She had a few broken legs and a lot of rehab, working with the recovery room in Dunedin, and the boots are very much part of her protocol. She's about to get the pants as well. So we have a version from the foot to the waist. So it's covering right through the legs and into the power muscles, the hip and glute and upper quads. Liv Podmore, hands up anyone that can put out 1700 watts on the bike. Well, not me. I think I hit about 700 this morning in a sprint. Well, Liv's north of 1700. She's a sprinter, a velodrome sprinter. And Liv's protocol, she's doing a lot of lifting in season in her strength phase. She's Cambridge based, and she found she absolutely loves starting a day on the boots. It gets her ready for business. Then after her morning session, which could be strength, and then afternoon session could be velodrome. So she's up to 3 times a day on the boots and getting very good results from it. If I was to summarize what's going on with these athletes, and I think it's a key takeaway for us all. It's not necessarily do what the recovery systems is the answer. What I would say is their habits. They have habits around recovery that keep them in good stead and that hold them in good stead, and make sure that they're locking in the gains, locking in the improvements, getting the benefit from their training and maximizing it, and influencing their sleep. So all of these guys reported back to me, and all of our weekend warrior athletes, which is most of our customer base, are people like everyone in the room, and myself included. It's a balancing act around everything that you're trying to do, and recovery is an essential element to making sure you're functioning across all the things you need to do, both as in your work life, professional life, home and family, as well as your passion for sport and making sure you get the most from that. So that's a wrap. We've got a bunch of really good blogs, I think, on our website. I would encourage you to subscribe. We've got a really good blog on parasympathetic system. We've got a good blog on intermittent compression and recovery for athletes. We've got one coming out which is very science-based around compression for recovery and compression for performance with athletes. So we're going to be releasing that this month. So I'd encourage you to just sign up for our newsletter and our blogs. And also you can follow us on Instagram at Recovery Systems.